above? Or would you define our existence here on Earth as a bubble reality?
We can define it as a bubble reality. It's an interesting and convenient way to talk about your particular universe. But that's, again, just an arbitrary label. If it works for you, use it. Now, the idea, again, of leaving the physical reality permanently, which I believe is what was being asked, is, again, you have your own timing. You will leave when you're ready to leave. You will leave when you're done with the theme that you chose to explore, unless you decide to explore a different theme, which is now possible in your physical transformational reality. But most of you will have set up some circumstance where you will simply leave when it is time to leave, when you're done with what you're doing, with what you're exploring, like anything. And again, if you're always curious about when that time might be, as we have suggested before, you can always lie down on the floor, you can close your eyes, you can say, I'm ready to leave. I'm done with what I'm doing in physical reality as an experience. And then if you can count to 10 and then open your eyes, you're not ready to leave. You're not done. Because it should be that easy to leave. If you are done, you would leave.
Wait, does that mean you can program having a peaceful transition when your time comes?
Why not?
How
and
would
again,
you program that?
Well, again, clarify everything in your life so that there is no fear-based beliefs remaining, so that you don't have to believe that there's any suffering needed or anything like that. And sometimes you will know that many people, just before, a split second before something happens that might actually kill them, will already be out of the body.
What about those people who are loved and have really good lives and everything, and then at the very end, they have an extremely difficult transition into spirit, painful experiences?
Again, there's a reason for everything. And it may have more to do with those that they're leaving behind in physical reality than it has to do with them. So again, as always, case by case, person by person, there's no one general, one size fits all to those particular kinds of experiences.
And I'm just thinking of the hybrid children. What's a good way to know if you're having a hybrid child dream? What are some symbols that typically show up in the dream?
Well, this is a large subject and it can take many forms. Perhaps if you have a dream literally of a hybrid, that would be obvious. But if you also see animals in nature or nature spirits in your dreams that seem particularly mischievous, it doesn't mean it is a hybrid child, but it can be one taking that form to have some fun and play around with you. But there are many other ways in which you can perceive that idea, and too many to go into at this time.
There is one where people see like a jar or something with a being inside of a jar. Is that?
It can be a representation of the hybridization chambers that they are gestating in once removed from the womb. And therefore it could be a calling card that hybrids will use. But again, it depends upon the hybrid child.
So if a child was in that state or stage of development as a hybrid, and you're there as in the dream state, you can communicate with that being at some stage similar to human fetus that is inside the body?
Telepathically, yes. Just as in what you call post-hypnotic regressions, you can take a person back into the womb and they're communicating telepathically with many different things.
Do these fetuses have the capability of communication right away, or do they have to reach a certain stage of development?
The communication can happen right away, but that simply may be coming from the spirit itself rather than through the fetus. If the fetus is not developed to the point where telepathic communication is possible through the brain, then the communication telepathically would probably be coming directly from the spirit that hasn't really fully connected with the body yet.
I see. And do all hybrid children speak English, or how do they speak to each other? Do they have other languages?
Well,
when
they
first come
speak
here?
telepathically, but they are learning some different languages that exist on your planet in order to blend in ultimately. But telepathically is what they use mostly among themselves. They do practice different languages and have a lot of fun with that, especially when they get something wrong. They laugh a lot.
Will they have names when they come here, or do we give them names?
It can be either. It's up to them to choose. Most of them will choose names from nature. But again, some of them may allow the adults that they meet to name them. It depends. Again, these are personal things. It depends on what they are attracted to do.
And the age that many of the children will be when we finally meet them here.
There will be exceptions, but most likely the concentrated range will be somewhere between 7 and 13.
And as a 7-year-old, though, they would be much higher functioning than a 7-year-old in our particular species.
Well, they will be much higher functioning than a 7-year-old used to be on your planet, but many 7-year-olds now being born on your planet are extremely high functioning.
Yes, we have noticed that. It's amazing what some of the kids can do now.
Yes.
I've noticed that some people are unaware of the different frequencies the 5 hybrid races normally vibrate at, and they become confused when they're hearing that a general interaction with Sasani beings is not appropriate right now, but only interactions with grays is possible. And can you summarize what the typical vibrational levels are of each of the 5 hybrid races and compare that to present day humans?
Yes. Well, we're not going to go into numbers, but we'll give you a general curve. The idea, again, is that the grays themselves, being hybrids, are still operating on a relatively low frequency. The frequencies got higher with the next version of the hybrids, the Mizani, and higher still with our civilization, the Sasani. But then it was recognized that the vibrations had to go down somewhat, or at least be altered in a certain way that became more compatible with humanity at a certain level, when humanity reaches that level, in order for the blending to take place that would allow Earth to evolve into the 6th hybrid race. So it kind of went up, and then it kind of went down, but not exactly down as you understand down. It simply was altered in a way, flavored in a way, that would allow the 4th and 5th hybrid races, the Shayayel and the Yayayel, and of course the Shalanaya, to still exhibit high frequencies, but the high frequencies that would be compatible vibrationally with evolved humans when humans are ready to have open contact with them. So you kind of see a peak and a decline, but not a decline in the normal sense, an alteration.
The decline doesn't mean that they start thinking negative thoughts, basically.
Correct. It's more of an alteration that is done in order to make them more vibrationally compatible with interacting with humans during open contact.
And you mentioned that Sasani children are born through the parents going into a meditative state and then forming an energy bubble, and then the being is created.
In the overlapping bubbles, yes.
Yes. When will humans be capable of this kind of procreation?
About 1,000 years.
Okay.
Give or take.
Oh, I know. And I meant to ask you, when you were talking about the vibrational states of the hybrids, since possibly the Pleiadians would be the first that we would have contact with.
Possibly.
What would their vibrational range be?
Well, again, it's high, but it also exhibits the same kind of alteration that we just described, so that they make themselves more vibrationally compatible. In other words, their vibration normally is very high, but they don't show you all of their frequency. So the idea is they make themselves more compatible by sort of closing doors on some of their frequency when they interact with humans. In much the same way that coming through the channel this way only represents maybe 5, 10, at the most 15% of my total vibration. So we make an alteration that makes us more vibrationally compatible, but the idea of being face-to-face with us would not allow that filtering to happen in quite the same way. But the Pleiadians are willing to do that because they are more closely related to you as your kind of genetic cousins.
Is there anything you could tell us about the Andromedans?
No, not at this time.
Okay. Well, we're going to wrap up in a minute here. Here's one question. You had mentioned that unconditional love is the frequency of existence itself.
Yes.
And you've said creation is only slightly more positive than negative. And does the negative polarity exist only in an incarnate experience?
No, it exists on every level. Again, only in the one where there is homogeneousness and no experience, no awareness, no brokenness, so to speak, is there none of the idea of the experience of positive or negative or neutrality. But in all that is, instantly, it creates the idea of the polarities and the neutrality becoming the trinity of positive, negative, and neutral. It exists on every level. Now, how you experience it is very different. And you don't have to experience negative things on certain higher levels, but you become more aware of the possibility and the probability of all the different ways that negativity could be chosen. You just don't choose it. But that doesn't mean it doesn't exist as an option. Look at the yin-yang symbol. Always remember that. There is the light side and the dark side, but in each, there is a drop of the other because the other is always accessible. No matter how far you go into the darkness, there's always a drop of light. No matter how far you are into the light, there's always a drop of darkness that is accessible to you. It doesn't mean you have to experience it, but it's always a choice.
Well, on that note, it's really good to know that I guess what you're saying also is if there is any dimension of time in your experience, then there's polarity, right?
Yes.
Okay, so that it's what is the level of consciousness, the highest level of consciousness that experiences polarity?
All that is.
Ah, I see. And how does that conform to the ideas of angels and those levels of consciousness?
Well, angels, as we have said, are kind of like the first reflection of all that is. And that's why you have the story of the angels of light and the angels of darkness. They are the first story, the first reflection beyond all that is that expresses the concept of polarity, or contains it at least. And therefore you have, shall we say, ensconced that idea of polarity even in the angels, because you talk about light angels and dark angels.
So if a person thinks that they are experiencing themselves coming from a reality where there is no negativity, it's not that the negative does not exist, it's that it's not perceived or it's not related.
It's not expressed.
It's not expressed.
Yes. It is validated for what it is, but not chosen or expressed as an experience.
So essentially an angel or any consciousness level below that would not experience negativity, but has recognition of negativity.
Yes, unless they wish to experience negativity. It always can be chosen for a variety of reasons. And again, it depends on the level, it depends on the frequency, as to whether it is more likely than not that it might be available as a choice, such as in your own world.
Whereas in your world, does anyone ever choose a negative experience?
No, thank you. Not now. There used to be those experiences when we were first evolving, after we were created, but no, not now. There's no reason.
And so illness doesn't exist in your world.
Not anymore.
But does illness always reflect the idea of negativity, or
no? No. Again, please remember, you can use positive things in a negative way. You can use negative mechanisms in a positive way, just as you're doing right now. You're using a negative mechanism of limitation to limit your greater consciousness in order to have a physical experience. That's a positive way to use a negative mechanism.
So, and maybe one of the greatest lessons from all of this is that there's always a silver lining, and if you can find it, it will shift you to a positive state.
Yes, and there's always a dark cloud too.
And best to leave that one alone. Huh?
Maybe, maybe not, because dark clouds produce wonderful rain.
That's true.
Thank you.
So it's all good.
If you look at it that way, yes. So.
Oh, and there was a request for a Halloween story.
A Halloween story. All right. We are going to pull this story from what you would recognize as the channel's future consciousness. In other words, it's a story that's in his consciousness that he hasn't realized yet and will write in the future. Of course, he will realize it now because we'll imprint it on him and impress it on him so he could write it sooner than he otherwise would have done. This is not an interference because these things are available to us through the channel's consciousness. And since it has to do with a story that he will have written, then we can pull it now because it is allowed to do so. This is called The Demon with the Sweet Tooth. Jack and Jill, 10-year-old twins, are made up like skeletons for Halloween. They have done this on their own because Jack is very excited about special effects makeup and has done a wonderful job making he and his twin sister look just like Day of the Dead skeletons. And they go around in their neighborhood collecting candy, and they arrive at the 13th house that evening, and a woman opens the door who is dressed like a clown and looks at them and says, "Oh, what wonderful costumes. Here is some candy for you." They very quickly say thank you and turn around and walk away because to them, clowns are even scarier than skeletons. And they continue on their way and arrive at the end of the block. And they look down the block, and it is very dark. There are very few streetlights. And Jill says, "Well, maybe we should go the other way." And Jack says, "Well, our big sister, Rachel, has said that some of the best candy is on this block, so we shouldn't be afraid of that." And Jill says, "But Rachel should have been with us." "Yes," says Jack, "but now she is in high school and says that chaperoning two young children is less exciting to her than going to her parties, her Halloween parties. Ooh, big deal, big grown-up parties. So we are now on our own for the moment. So let us go down this block and collect some more candy." And so Jill reluctantly agrees, and they move down the block. They don't get more than maybe about 100 feet when all of a sudden a huge, scary, demonic clown shows up in front of them and howls at them on the wind, and they freeze, not able to speak or run. And the demonic clown with glowing green eyes reaches out and snatches away their bags of candy and devours it in an instant, and then belches and smells like a sewer and disappears. And it takes about a minute or two for Jack and Jill to be able to speak. And when Jack speaks, he says, "Wow." And Jill says, "Wow, that's all you have to say after that horribly frightening experience? Wow?" And Jack says, "Well, that was some of the best special effects I've ever seen." And Jill says, "You mean you believe that wasn't real?" He says, "How could it be, silly? Demons aren't real. I suppose you still believe in Santa Claus too, don't you?" And Jill says, "Well, if you're sure, well, how did our candy disappear?" "Well, it's a magic trick," says Jack. "You remember seeing that magician on TV make that elephant disappear? Well, candy should be easy peasy by comparison." "Well, I wonder who did that," said Jill. "They must have some amazing technology to do something like this." "Oh, yes," said Jack, "probably a hologram connected with some magician in disguise that we didn't see. Who knows? But that was a wonderfully frightening experience. Let's go down this block and see what else we can find." So they agree to continue now with empty bags, having to need to fill them up again. And again they go from house to house and get more candy. And by the time they have finished with the 26th house, again, 2 times 13, the demon clown shows up again, and with a horrible howl on the wind, snatches their candy away and devours it again, and belches once more and leaves, vanishes into the shadows. And Jack and Jill said, "All right, well, enough of this. We're not going to have any candy left if this continues. I wonder who's behind it and how they were able to do this again at the other end of the block. We thought maybe it would just be near their own house, but clearly they're capable of doing something like this no matter where we are. So let's test that, because I'm going to make sure that this doesn't happen again, because we need to keep our candy. So they pick up their empty bags and they go down the other side of the block, and again, after they reach the 39th house, 3 times 13, sure enough, the demonic clown manifests again and towers over them with its glowing green eyes and reaches out, but Jack and Jill react quickly and hide their bags of candy behind their backs. And Jack says, "No, you shall not have our candy again." And Jill says, "Yes, be gone, O demon clown." And they have a laugh about this because, again, they're pretty sure that this is just a special effect. But as they confront the demon, surprisingly, shockingly, the demon clown begins to cry. And as it continues to cry, it starts to shrink. And it continues to cry and continues to shrink. And it shrinks down and changes into the image, into the ghost of a 7-year-old little boy. And this 7-year-old little boy ghost continues to weep in front of them, floating in the air before their eyes. And suddenly, Jack and Jill recognize the little boy ghost. "Josh Graves," Jack says. "But you died last year." "Yes," said the ghost, whimpering. "I was sick for a very long time. And I could never go trick-or-treating, and finally I died, never having experienced Halloween. And so I became angry and jealous of all the children that go around trick-or-treating and want to snatch their candy away, because if I can't have it, you can't have it." And Jack and Jill felt compassion for the little boy who had died. And Jill said, "I'll tell you what, why don't you come trick-or-treating with us now?" "Do you mean it?" said Josh. "Oh yes, it would be great fun, because you can actually scare the people after they give us candy, because you are a real ghost. And that would be so much fun." Well, the little ghost boy stopped his sniffling and said, "Yes, I would love to do that." And so the 3 of them traipsed off and went trick-or-treating and received a lot of candy and gave a lot of scares. And at the end of it, Jack and Jill said, "You know, I have an idea. Why don't you come trick-or-treating with us every year?" "Oh, I would love that," said Josh Graves. And so finally he was befriended by someone living who could allow him to experience trick-or-treating and Halloween in the way it was meant to be experienced on Earth. And so in the meantime, he returned to spirit and felt the freedom that wasn't his until Jack and Jill had befriended him. But every year he would return, and the 3 of them would go trick-or-treating together. The end.
Oh my goodness, that's wonderful.
Yes, it is. And so maybe many of you this Halloween will befriend a spirit and go trick-or-treating together, knowing that they are there with you, whether you can see them or not, having as much fun as you're having, so that you can know you can always go trick-or-treating with the spirits on the other side. So now, allow yourselves to relax and experience the meditation that we have for you this day.
Thank you so much, Bashar. We love you so very much.
Our unconditional love to you all, Nania. Again, prepare now for your meditation.